So, welcome everyone. My name is Shai. I'm from Georgetown's Thrive Center. And look, you've read the description, you know what this is about. Challenging behaviors are the number one reason children get expelled from early childhood programs, and they are the number one driver of teacher turnover. We have been holding research groups and surveying the workforce from around the country. We have heard, I mean, beyond the data, the anecdotes really are shocking. In Indiana, they told us, don't even call it challenging behaviors anymore. This is about safety. In Illinois, someone said, I feel like I have a abusive relationship with the job that I used to love. The thing is, most of the time, the adults around the children don't have the support, the training, the coaching to really respond differently than to feel like that and to ultimately leave. And this is what this series is really about. Each month, our team and folks from the field, some from grantees, some from people who work with grantees, are going to dig into a specific aspect of challenging behaviors, what's driving them, what's working, and what the field actually needs from you. These things, every month, we're designing them as a conversation, not a lecture. We're not trying to academically educate you. We want to show you what are the best practices. We want to show you what we're seeing out there, what your peers are seeing out there, and hopefully, these monthly convenings are only the beginning of an ongoing conversation that we will continue to have. Hello, Gail from Alaska. Good to see you. So with that, pass it on to the team here. And again, thank you, everyone for joining us. For the folks from Alaska, it's super early. Some folks, it's right lunchtime, so we appreciate you. Neil?
Thanks, Shai, and welcome everybody. We're super excited to have you here. Um, and as Shai mentioned, this is the first in a series that we're putting on from the Thrive Center here at Georgetown in response to what we've been hearing from all of you. And I like that Shai's already made friends. He knows Gail from Alaska, and he knows from Oswego, and we've all been working together for a long time on this. I've been doing this work for 30 years. I was talking about challenging behavior 30 years ago. I had much longer hair. It was parted in the middle and feathered back, but I was talking about it back then. And so we really want to provide some support to the field. And as you'll see as we go through this, today is the first. We have lots of different ways in which we think it will be helpful to address this. And we'll move on from there. Let's get a sense of who's here with us. Um, We'd like you to maybe put in the chat a little bit about these. What's the most challenging behavior you deal with? And for each of you, there may be different things, as we're going to discuss today, that you find challenging. So it's not just this is challenging or not, it's what do you find the most challenging and what are you hoping to leave here with today? And we'll try and go the big emotions in all caps. I love it. Physical aggression. I see a lot of the word aggression. Suicidal verbiage. Love to hear suicidal verbiage when we're talking about very young children. So these are the kinds of things that we know you're trying to deal with. We are here to provide some practical strategies for that. There's our friend Dr. Askew, Curtis, that Curtis has worked with us on our Head Start Center, and you know Dr. Askew. Great to see our friends here.
The chat is flying, Neil. I feel like this
Yeah,
is, if there's one question to get a chat going, it's probably
yeah,
this.
yeah. And so we asked this because we also want to know what you're hoping to leave with. So maybe let's switch gears a little bit and add in a thing that you're hoping to leave here.
I love this. How to support the staff under me. How are we really helping to build that adult capacity?
Yeah, the shout out to supporting some of those incredible teachers with these challenging behaviors. Yeah.
Brittany put in there earlier on, what can we do? I think that that's a sentiment that so often when the behavior is getting big, when it's feeling overwhelming, we have this sense of what can we do? what more can we do? What else can we do? What should we try?
Great. These are super helpful for us. I think as I saw things go by, I think we are going to address a lot of what you've brought up. And again, you'll join us, every month, and we'll be addressing very different aspects, as you'll see on the next couple of slides. So let's keep moving. Julie's given me a very strict timeline for how to get through slides. So I'm Neil Horn. I'm the director of Infant, Early Childhood, and Relational Health division here at the Thrive Center at Georgetown. And as I mentioned, I've been doing this work for a really long time. It's why I keep up my picture from 1987 instead of actually a picture that looks like me. And as you'll hear today, this particular session will have the three of us, but there'll be other members of our Thrive team and members of our Head Start and Early Care and Education community joining us. So I'm going to pass it over to Julia.
Hi, everyone. My name is Julia Sales. I'm a licensed mental health clinician by training. I also like to say I grew up as a mental health consultant in Head Start. Shout out Boston ABCD Head Start, my hometown. And I am thrilled to be here today to have this conversation with you all and to think about how we are really uplifting the field of early childhood and infant and early childhood mental health. Curtis?
Hi, everybody. I'm excited to be here. I am a licensed mental health consultant with Community Council of Idaho. Um, I'm licensed here in the state of Idaho as a counselor, and I love this world. I love seeing the growth in the children, and you know, I just recognize the great need, and so I'm happy to see over 600 people here really trying to dig in because we know this is the challenging part of our job, but we also know that this is powerful. And um, for any migrant seasonal Head Start folks on here, that's our program. We're migrant seasonal, and we're about to do our ramp up to start receiving all of our kids back. So I'm getting really excited for that. The other aspect of this I just wanted to share real quick is I was a Head Start kid, and I was one of these challenging behavior kids. And so I love to share that because, especially with the teachers I work with, because it makes a difference the work you're doing. So I'm happy to be here and support. Yeah.
Great. So just a little bit more about the series. So we'll be with you to kick it off today. And then each month, we've tried to put together webinar topics that speak to the different ways in which challenging behaviors come up. So next month, we'll have folks talking about regulation and self-regulation and what that means for the children, what it means for the adults. We're going to spend a lot of time over the next few months not just talking about children and their behavior, but adults and their behavior as well, as you all have put here in the chat. We will come back in May and focus specifically on mental health consultation. It's a big piece of the work we do here at Thrive. We have the National Center of Excellence for Infant and Early Childhood Mental Health Consultation, a ton of resources, and we'll really focus on that in May. We'd be remiss if we didn't get to staff wellness. We like to wait until June when some of you actually will have a couple months off, and maybe that's when your wellness feels like it starts, but we see it as a year-round piece. So we'll spend some time talking about wellness. And as you see here, we actually understand the connection between behavior and other aspects of child development, including nutrition. And so we're going to talk a bit here about responsive feeding and how that feeds into. Oh, look at me making a joke, Julia and Curtis. How that feeds into behaviors, and then we'll end in August this series. Maybe there's more coming. With talking a bit more about trauma-informed practice and how that relates to this work. So we're really excited to get going on all of this. We know that you are too, based on how many people have shown up and taken an hour out of their day from far and wide. So we'll keep moving in the interest of time.
All right. So There are so many of you out there. We know that you are leaving really busy lives, really busy jobs to be here. And so we wanted to just ground ourselves for a minute. This can be a really activating topic. It can be overwhelming to think about the people we support. It can be overwhelming to think about a child's experience and how are we supporting them. It can be overwhelming to think about how families are showing up and what that means and how we support them. So I'd like to encourage everyone to take 3 really big, deep breaths right now and just breathe. Notice what it feels like for your body to do 3 big belly breaths. And then we want to take a second and reflect. You've already shared some of those behaviors that have led you to be here today with us, some of those behaviors that popped right up when that chat was flying. As you're thinking about those behaviors, whether it's a child or a family, or thinking about how you support staff, notice what's coming up for you. What's happening in your body? Are you noticing tension? Are your shoulders up to your ears? Do you have a tummy ache? Notice what's happening in your thoughts. Are you feeling distracted? Hopelessness? And notice what's happening in your feelings. What are some of those big feelings that come up for you as you think about behaviors that are challenging? We're going to pause for just a second here. And then I'm going to ask you to take 3 more big, deep breaths. And then in the vein of collective care, I would love if folks could share 1 or 2 words that keep you going in the chat. So even when things are really hard, even when that behavior is super unsafe, even when it feels like I can't do this another day, what are those 2 things that keep you going? I love this.
Yeah, I love to see those come in. Because we really got to connect with those things that keep us going. And I think the power in pausing and reflecting and breathing, or doing whatever we need to slow down some of these interactions and some of these situations, helps us connect with these things that help us keep going. And I think that's one of the biggest traps with when we're facing challenging behaviors is that the velocity of it, the speed of it is so high. And so we've got to intentionally use some things to slow down these things in reflection, breathing, pausing, and connecting with these important principles that keep us going.
I love that, Curtis. And I'm loving how much connection, love, joy, laughter, compassion is coming up in this chat. I think those are truly the things that keep us motivated and help us to show up time and time again. So as we kick off here, we wanted to talk a little bit about what the research tells us. So as we think about behaviors that are challenging, this study comes out of the University of Wisconsin, and they looked at 555 2, 3, and 4-year-olds. And you might be saying, well, why did they group those kids all together? Well, part of the reason is when they looked at their outcomes, they realized that it was not statistically significant between 2-year-olds, 3-year-olds, 4-year-olds, and even branching into some of the 5-year-olds in the behaviors that they saw. And so what they observed is they looked at these 555 kids and they saw that most kids during these observations paid no attention to what they were asked to do. They said no. They refused to do what you wanted to do or follow that direction. They wasted a lot of time. They were slow when it came to getting dressed or washing their hands or brushing their teeth. They didn't finish what they started. They tended to wiggle around a lot. It was hard for them to sit still. They laughed, they squealed, they jumped, they moved around quite a bit, and they were loud when they did that. They oftentimes refused food, and almost all of them were difficult to reason with at one point or another in this observation. Through the same study, they saw that most of those 555 kids, when they were observed, grabbed toys, they hit or they shoved at some point in the observation. They asked for help when they didn't need it. They were easy to cry or they were kind of sulky, right? Lip out. They wanted to stay close to adults. Oftentimes, they were looking for attention from adults by showing off in various different ways. And they were oftentimes staying awake during rest time, during nap time. We know that can be a hot ticket time across the day. And many kids would go to adults with criticisms of others. So that sort of tattling on others, that was a common, most, again, 2, 3, and 4-year-olds did this. More than a quarter of the same sample size bit their nails, they broke toys, they tore books, they marked up the walls, drew on the walls, they had big, big tantrums, they had bathrooming accidents, they were fearful of animals or really loud noises, and more than a quarter secretly were taking things that belonged from others. The pat down of finding the little manipulative bears or like, the little things that we find in pockets or backpacks. So the reason that we wanted to elevate this is we want to hold that many of the behaviors that we look at that sometimes rise to the level of challenging are actually really developmentally appropriate. They're behaviors that we would expect to see from 2, 3, 4, and 5-year-olds. And so we wanted to sort of have this conversation in the chat. We'd love to hear from you all. And then Neil and Curtis, I'd love to hear from both of you. When we're thinking about the topic of challenging behaviors, how do we continue to remind ourselves that so many of the behaviors that we see are actually part of really healthy development for young children?
So while people are writing, Julia, it was of great interest to me to see when we asked about the behaviors of challenge, we had an unbelievably long list of negative behaviors. And by simply taking 3 breaths and pausing, we had a whole long list of love, compassion, patience, all kinds of positives. The seesaw really changed direction, and I think that that's easy to do here. And I think one of the things that we'll want to work with all of you about is in the moment. How do we do it? And so I love what you're putting in here about sort of reminding folks. As I looked at that list, there are things on the list that I still do. I don't know about the rest of you, but I'm like, oh, I think I'm part of the quarter. And I think that um, this idea, and Fred from Texas is remind us about co-regulation, which we'll speak to. Sort of this idea of it's hard to do in the moment, but reminding ourselves that the child is 2. What do we really expect a 2-year-old to do, not to do a lot of, to not do a lot of? And it is harder in the moment, but we're going to talk a little bit about practical strategies, and I'm seeing some of them in here.
I love that.
Yeah, I also love that. And Neil, your comment about recognizing some of my own behaviors as an adult. One of the things in various of my settings that I'll hear is like, chairs are for sitting on, they're not for standing on. But I have my roommates reminded me, my old university roommates reminded me of several years back. They have pictures of me standing on my chair studying. And I'm like, I do these things, or we'll talk about sharing, and yes, it's important to be teaching some of these skills, but we can remember if we reflect on some of our own behavior as well, like sharing. Like I don't often share certain things, and so that helps me get into this space, along with, as has been mentioned many times, realizing, well, this child is too. This child has never been out of their home. This is their first time with other children. And so those things help me remember that, oh, this could be very normal for this child in this situation.
Mhm. I love that. Emily in the chat also elevated how important it is that we hold developmental age along with chronological age. And so often with some of our kids who are having difficult moments, in that moment, they may chronologically be 4 or 5. Developmentally, they may be down at that 18-month level. They may be down at that 16-month level. And so, how are we really holding and thinking about how we meet them where they're at? how are we saying, you know what, I'm going to start right where you're comfortable and we're going to go ahead and scaffold on up versus getting into that place where we're saying, you're four, you should be able to X, Y, and Z. I think for me, anytime I hear that or I find myself falling into that, you should be, it's a big cue or a big sign of pause. I need to check myself. That's my stress coming out in that moment. That's me losing my best practice in that moment. And so I just wanted to elevate that too as we go.
Yeah, thank you for that. Two things I wanted to point out. I saw, culture plays a role in this. And definitely, and that's culture for the child, but also for the teachers, for you all as teachers or other staff, and recognizing the different cultural values. I'm in a multicultural marriage. My wife is Latina. I work with primarily Latino f families, and for us, American gringos, temperature isn't as big of a deal. But for many Latino families, it's a huge deal, and so you'll see parents bring their children in bundled in blankets, and so just that cultural piece and recognizing how that plays. And then the other aspect of this was that I just wanted to highlight, Julia, again, the developmental piece, recognizing that. And sometimes when we're really close with a child, when we know them really well, we can have an image of them that is developmentally more capable in certain aspects. And so realizing, oh, yeah, I am seeing you as kind of older. I mean, it happens with my own children all the time, but if we can check in with ourselves, pause and reflect, it helps.
Love that.
It's great. All right, so let me do a little bit of level setting, just because we like to use lots of different words. And as we go through this series, you're going to hear lots of different terms. And so we've heard challenging behavior. We talk about behavior that challenges adults, behavioral concerns. And I think what I've seen in the chat is all of you have sort of spoken to, here's the central idea about all of those terms, right? Behavior has meaning. It's telling us something about what the child is trying to communicate. And while we would love for the child to just sit down and say, listen, I'm having big feelings. I don't know what to tell you, but I'm having big feelings, so I'm going to chuck a chair. They generally tend not to, right? They start to do things to show us that in that form of communication, here's what's happening for me. But all behavior has meaning, both for children and adults. And I saw some of you speak to that in the chat. Our perception drives how we interpret it. Those of you who know me know that I have four children. I had three children in 16 months. I let a lot of things go. My twins taught me a lot about just not worth it. So my perception of what behaviors are, big behaviors, challenging behaviors, is going to be different than somebody else's. But our perceptions drive how we interpret that. And that is based on a lot of things that many of you have alluded to here in the chat. And we've got to understand it in the context of how that child's relating to other children, to adults, what's happening, so that we're not just sort of seeing the behavior as an isolated behavior. We're seeing it in the larger context of what's been happening for this child in their relationships at home, here, with children, with other adults. And the part that people don't like to hear is that we're responsible for adapting, right? So today's the start of baseball season. I don't really like baseball, but there is something about baseball that's sort of interesting, which is that the pitcher has to determine each time the pitcher throws a pitch what they're going to do. And it's predicated on what's the batter? Who is it? What kind of pitches do they do well, not do well? What is a catcher? There's a lot of factors. So that idea of how we as adults are pitching to the child is an important sort of concept to keep in mind. And it's all based on our perception, all those other sorts of pieces here. So let's just keep those in mind as we talk more. Click. I love the transitions, Julie. I know you worked
Do
on
you
this a
love this?
lot.
It's so fancy.
We can have some. It's so good. It makes it go nice and
Right,
slow for me, which is great.
right. This is the
Um,
pizzazz part.
It is. This is if I was going to bedazzle my jeans, this is how I would do it, is I would do it in this way. But let's just talk sort of definitionally. And I'm going to spend more time on the second piece than the first, but it's a repeat. And I'm going to say this to you because I want you all to go back, and when you think about the child that's on your mind right now, a repeated pattern of behavior, means it happens over and over and over again, not one time and it really upsets you, that interferes with learning or engagement in pro-social interactions with peers and adults. All of that is what makes something challenging. And that it's not responsive. It's why you always get told we have to try 5 different interventions and we have to document. Why? Because we want to see if it's responsive to the developmentally appropriate guidance. And then lastly, and maybe Julie, you want to talk a bit more here about these 3 factors that you should be considering in terms of that behavior.
I think oftentimes we get the first two, we're like, yep, this is definitely a challenging behavior. And I think really being intentional about thinking and observing and documenting intensity, frequency, and duration of the behavior are huge. One, because like Neil said, it's our role as adults to adapt, right? We have to make the shifts if we want to see the shifts in those behaviors. And sometimes as adults, we're stressed out, we're burnt out, we're tired, we're overwhelmed, and it can feel like whatever I'm trying isn't really working. And so sometimes we abandon something that actually is working because maybe we're not seeing a decrease in how many times that behavior is happening, but the intensity is actually going down. Maybe we're not seeing a decrease in duration, so how long that behavior is happening, but it actually is happening less across the day. And so, really holding on to intensity, frequency, and duration can be huge data points for us, both formally and informally, not only to better understand when behaviors are occurring and give us more clues about what might be happening for that child in that moment, but also as we start to implement strategies. We know sometimes we get overwhelmed. We want to speed up. We want it to be done. We want to help them. We want the behavior to just be done with. And we know this is a long, slow process. When we are working on building skills for young kids, it takes time. And so, how do we make sure that we have that motivation and that we have these points in our brain to say, you know what, this actually is working for this child? It's just going a little bit slower than what we might like.
Yeah, and I'll do another pitch for slowing things down and pausing and reflecting. Because as we're tracking some of this, we really do have to approach it from an objective stance of giving the intervention a chance to work. Because if we come at this from the stance of here's more evidence for why this behavior or the what this child is doing is too much. It's going to be very hard. And anytime that we're like evidence finding, we it's a cue for me at least to slow down and reflect a little bit more so I can get a better objective observation of intensity, frequency, and duration.
I love that, Curtis.
Okay. You want to take this, Julia? Good.
Okay, yeah, definitely I do. So
Well,
let's do some
probably
more
because
reflection.
you were probably supposed to, and I was like making believe that I knew what I was doing. Go ahead.
No, I love this. Clearly, we're
Yeah.
super coordinated over here. So we know that being able to step back, being able to reflect, being able to have a deeper understanding of what is happening for us as the adult in that moment, where our baseline is at any given point in time in terms of our own well-being, our own capacity to regulate, our own capacity to manage stress. This is a hard job. We know that being in early childhood is the second most stressful profession behind nursing. So have a high demand on time. We have a high demand in the sense of keeping kids safe, teaching them, nurturing them, supporting them. And oftentimes we have low control in how we do that, right? So we have this place where we have regulations that we have to follow. We have to do things a certain way. Sometimes those guidelines and guidance don't match the best way that we know how to do something. And so we want to be able to reflect to help to regulate. We want to think about how are staff in your program talking about behavior? And we talk about this a lot when we talk about wellness. We'll say like, how are you? And then we say, no, how are you really? And so we want to do the same thing here. How do you talk about behavior? In this space with our new 700 best friends, we're all like, yes, behavior's communication. Yes, we know there's no such thing as a bad child, right? And we also know that sometimes behind closed doors, the conversation looks a little different. When we're really stressed, sometimes the conversation looks different. And we want to pause here and think about when does that happen? Why does that happen? And what does that mean when we are sort of having those dual conversations? I think one thing we're hearing, and Neil and Curtis, you can hop in here too, is that oftentimes we're hearing that there's a lot of new staff coming in. We know staff turnover is a really big issue right now. And so, um, how do staff know what's developmentally appropriate? If you're a Head Start program and you're converting slots into early Head Start and you've been working as a preschool teacher, are you thinking about what's appropriate behavior for a 1-year-old, a 2-year-old versus maybe the 5-year-olds you were working with before? And then what are those beliefs and values that we bring? We all have our own identities, we all have our own lived experience, and sometimes that doesn't match with the way we have to do things within our program or the way we do things in places like Head Start.
I think the other piece, if we're being honest, and I see it in the chat here from several folks, is folks feel like they've tried everything. They've done this. We've done everything. We've tried everything. And I think that that's the part where I feel like then people get to a place where like I'm burnt, I can't do it. So I think we'd encourage you to think about what did you do? How did you measure it? How do you know it didn't work? And this is easy, right? As a much like Curtis and Julia as mental health consultant in Head Start. And I think that part of the beauty of mental health consultation, quite honestly, is that it's somebody who comes in from the outside and allows you to take a pause and sits with you and says, what did you try? So when you say you tried everything, I want to hear what everything is. I want to hear what it is that this child is demonstrating. I saw earlier in the chat we have 18 children and I can't pay attention to the other 17. And I think that part of this is how do we do that pause and reflect? You guys did it for 3 breaths and it flipped you from all the negatives to the positive. So how do we help staff do that so that when they're being challenged, and the challenges are very real. I am with you on the kinds of things that you all are confronting on a daily basis, but how do we start to take a different perspective? How do we start to just shift one step over? How do we come off the mound? I'm going to use my really crappy baseball thing until somebody says that's dumb, but how do we step off the mound and just regather and say, it's worth it because I do care about children. I do this work because I have love and compassion and hope and all those things that you talked about and the values of being in this work in Head Start. So we'll talk a little bit about practical strategies here in a sec. Let's
Yeah.
maybe, Julie, we talked about maybe taking this down for just a couple
Mhm.
minutes and just seeing if folks have particular questions or thoughts that they want to, so we don't wait till the end. I know we have some other things to get. Curtis, did I cut you
Yeah.
off? I'm sorry. Go ahead,
No,
Curtis.
yeah. As we're taking the slides down, I just wanted to take a minute to validate some of the emotions I'm seeing come through the chat. And yeah, professionally, I'm trained as a logotherapist, so meaning centered counseling. And I do a lot of play therapy. And a part of this is being okay feeling our feelings. Like it sucks to get spit on and punched by a 5-year-old. Um, and it sucks to get chairs thrown at us and so what I want to avoid is that as we're trying to implement strategies and we're frustrated because it takes time for them to work or they're not working, um, I want to prevent us adding more stress, adding more burden to ourselves, because it's very easy to get the point to say, I'm a professional, I should be able to do this. Um, and it's not working and I can't connect. And so as soon as we start talking to ourselves that way, even if it's not verbal, if it's in our head, we're adding more of the burden in. And so I want to validate what you're feeling, and that's okay to be feeling that. Accepting that those feelings is important. It's important for our own mental health, and to be able to continue in connect with all those things that you guys listed that are important for you in in the role and why we keep going.
Mhm. I just saw it popping through the chat. We've tried a strategy, it works one day and then it doesn't work the next day. And I think we hear this all the time. I know all three of us have lived this too, as people who are coming in to try and offer support and recognize how frustrating, confusing, um, delightful that can feel sometimes. And you're like, I've broken through. This is it. This is a strategy that's going to fix it. Right. And I think so often we get into that place where we sort of turn into fixer mode. And I think the three of us are firmly believers that we're not here to fix, right? We're here to support. We're here to scaffold. We're here to skill build. We're here to teach. We're here to show young kids how they can have a new relational template. Sometimes these behaviors have been happening for months and months and months, or years and years and years. And there's been lots of different experiences of why that's been happening. And our job is we are able to show up and say, hey, I can give you a positive relational experience. I can show up as that regulated adult and as we think about unsafe behaviors or those big aggressive behaviors that people mentioned earlier on, the starting place is with adults, right? Adults who are not judging themselves, adults who are regulated enough to be able to reflect and say, when am I unintentionally escalating this behavior? When am I really looking through and saying, nope, we've tried this, we've given it a really good try, and we're going to let it go? When am I trusting and saying, nope, we need to keep trying? It worked yesterday. That's a good sign. Let's keep at it. It might not work every single time, but is that part of building our new relational template? Is that part of our skill building that we're seeing coming in live, happening in that relational context for that child?
I want to say, there's a lot going on in the chat, and I appreciate the sort of the volume of the challenges. I also see Tiffany pointing out practice opportunities, and I always try and remind folks that none of us seem upset if the 3-year-old can't read. We have no problem saying it's a process that goes from phonetic awareness to phonological processing to, and we understand that it takes time and that it is no different in behavior, right? And learning behaviors, right? If we can't expect that children are just going to have a behavior. We're going to work with them. And some of them will have an easier time developing the sort of positive pro-social behaviors, and some will not. And there are a variety of factors that many of you have pointed out in terms of supports and trauma and other sorts of things. And that patience piece, as I see in the chat, is not easy. It is critical. And again, if we were asking them to ride a bike, learn how to swim, read a book, any other skill, we would say it takes time. And for some reason, and maybe it is because of the danger that some of these behaviors present to you all, but for many of them, it is more challenging to be patient and have that developmental trajectory in mind. Right. And I'm with you, Deborah, that
Yeah.
if there are staff and other children, it, we can't stand around and be like, it's okay. They'll develop this skill. Like we can't. So we need to figure out other sorts of things to do in the moment. But I think what I'm seeing in here is this mix of how do we do what we talked about earlier about being developmentally aware, having appropriate expectations, keeping people safe, and balancing that with the keeping people safe, being able to be educators for the other 17 children in that classroom and things like that. And I think part of this is the support of the administration. It's about having time and space for reflection and all those kinds of things. So those are the kinds of things we want to talk a little bit about in terms of practical strategies with the remaining time.
Mhm. Great.
Yeah. While
Samantha,
Julia,
oh, yeah, go
okay.
ahead.
While Julia pulls that up, I just you know, it's continuing with this idea of we're much more patient with some of the cognitive learning, math, reading, all of that. And it's so much easier to find humor in the mistakes in that. We can laugh when, when they skip count, 1, 3, 12, 15. It's really hard to find humor, when they smack their friend in the face. Um, and I would add in there are appropriate ways to find humor in the social emotional blunders that we ourselves make or that children make, and keep people safe. And so finding that kind of balance is helpful because the humor really does help us keep going.
I love that, Curtis. I love a playful approach. How do we find the humor? How are we looking for those glimmers? How are we looking for those hopeful words you all shared up that keep us going? And how do we remember that the kids we work with are little? They've only had 36 months of life experience or 48 months of life experience. Everything is brand new. And so, as much as things may feel challenging at times, it's also an incredibly hopeful time. We have so much opportunity in early childhood to think about how we support young children, how we support healing, how we support skill building, how we support that relational patterning. And we get the honor of doing that. And I think that's exciting. As hard as this work is, the payout of it and thinking about the investment in young children is immense and it's amazing. All right, so let's talk about a couple of practical strategies. So I don't think any of these strategies are going to blow your mind. There's not going to be a secret one we've been holding on to at Georgetown that you're like, this is it. This is the one we've been waiting for. Yes. Okay, so just putting that out there. But these are some good reminders. We want to think about how we really are leveraging relationships. How are we pausing? How are we reflecting? How are we starting with ourselves as the adult? And then how are we thinking about finding and making sure that we are elevating those really good moments? Because there are good moments. Even with the hardest child, there are still really great moments that are happening every day. How are we really amping up that positive descriptive feedback? And this is for a whole program, right? So if you know a teacher is in it in their classroom, they're having that year, they're having that hard year. How are we making sure as colleagues, as supervisors, as support staff, that we are amping up the positive descriptive feedback to that teacher? That's going to help to sustain them. It's going to help them to keep going. How are we making sure that we are giving this positive descriptive feedback to our kids who may have challenging moments or tricky behaviors or challenging behaviors with the same intensity? Oftentimes when we're redirecting, there's a level of intensity there. Neil, walking feet. Neil, gentle hands. Neil, remember, be nice with your friends. Neil, are you sharing, Neil? Neil, gentle. Walking, Neil, push in your chair, Neil, right? We're using names a lot. There's an intensity there. How are we making sure that we are having that same level of intensity? Neil is such an amazing friend. Neil comes up with the coolest ideas. Wow, Neil, when you went over and you picked that up, you were being such a helper in our classroom. Neil, you know how to do that. Look at you go. I remember when you couldn't do that, but you can do it now. That's amazing, right? We're being positive, we're being descriptive, and we're doing it a lot. And we're doing it a lot more than we are giving those redirects or those negative moments. I think many people have seen the piggy bank, but we know sort of the magic ratio is the 5-to-1. If you think about one child and trying that for even 15 minutes across the day, it can make a game-changing moment. You can notice in that 15 minutes, did we see a difference in their behavior when we were being intentional about really picking up on the positive, really noticing that, and making sure that we were giving those 5 positive opportunities for the redirects. And this is just a little place where you can think about what are those deposits? How are we depositing those positives in? And what are some of those withdrawals that we're taking out of that piggy bank? How are we aware of that? How are we looking for that balance? And how do we start small as we're building the skill within ourselves? I think a lot of times people will say, we do positives, we do that already. But oftentimes there's a lot of room to be more intentional about it and to amp it up. We wanted to elevate banking time, and Maddie just put in the chat a whole great resource for you if you're interested in banking time. This is my favorite intervention because it is cheap. It is free. Actually, you can use it preventatively, you can use it promotionally, or you can use it as an intervention. But basically what you're doing is you are picking that child who needs that extra relational strength. They need that extra connection, and you are meeting with them for 10 to 15 minutes, preferably outside of the classroom, but you can do it inside of the classroom too. You do this 2 to 3 times a week, and you are giving them that one-on-one time. You are playing with them, you're following their lead, you're giving them those opportunities to show you you all the things that they delight in, and you narrate. You sportscast what they're doing, you use helping statements, you might describe the emotions that you're seeing on their face. What you're not doing is asking a ton of questions. We're not asking what color or how many or any of those testing questions. We're really thinking about strengthening that relationship. And for people who are worried about other kids in their class because they have someone with a big challenging behavior who takes a lot of time, this is a great strategy to use preventatively with kids who are doing great to show them, I see you, I'm here with you, I'm still connected with you. We also have a few in the moment strategies. So this is when we're thinking about the behavior is big, it's happening now. Did you want to jump in here, Neil, on this one?
Yeah, no, I am. This one I actually knew my cue. No, we're good. Um, you kept telling me about my feet and my hands, and I got thrown off because it just felt like a regular day in my house. I do think that again, the 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 piece that we hear the most is that's great. I love to do that when I have time, and I will, but I don't have time. What do I do? How do I respond? And so, a couple of things here is first step is being aware. What is it that you're responding to? What is developmentally appropriate? If a child doesn't follow directions the first time, we call that being a child. That's what we call it. That's the clinical term. I'm just telling you, there children aren't supposed to follow directions 100% of the time. That's just it's okay. So being aware of what is it, and when I am consulting, when I'm seeing children and family and therapy, wherever I'm doing that work, my first question to everybody is always, what's your goal? Is your goal to have a child sit in circle time for 45 minutes? Is your goal to have a child follow directions every single time? Because when I come in and you said to me, this child never follows directions, and I come in and I see them follow a direction, we're going to have to talk about. So when are they not following directions? And let's be aware. So having you be aware, doing that pause and reflect. It's not 5 minutes. It's not, hold on, class. I know the chair is going across the room 3 times. Give me a second. It's a quick thing. Thinking to yourself, even before you go in, how do I respond with each and every child? I understand the ratios I've seen in the chat. None of us are disagreeing with the challenges. But what do I expect about each and every child? Did I expect a particular child to be challenging? When is my response going to be different for this one versus this one? Back to our pitching analogy. And how am I feeling? We spend so much time talking about, boy, that kid is just angry all the time. There are adults, if we're being honest, that seem angry all the time. So I think part of this is to really become aware. When we talk about trauma informed work down the line in a few months, we're going to talk about first step is awareness. What is the behavior trying to communicate? What's my plan? How all of that should be thought of in some ways before the behavior ever appears. Because if you know the behavior is a repetitive pattern, as we said, challenging behaviors are not one-offs. They're a repeated pattern of behavior. You have some time to reflect. It might not be always in the moment. Okay, on to the big finish.
Right. Okay, so another strategy we wanted to elevate for in the moment, this is when the behavior is happening. We know teaching is not occurring right now, but oftentimes what I see when I go into classrooms, and I'm definitely guilty of this myself because I'm a fast talker and I love to talk, is I talk too much. I use way too many words. And so one small thing you can think about as you go back to your practice, as you think about that child who brought you here today, is really hold yourself accountable. Think about your own piece of this and think about 10 words or less, 10 seconds or less. How are we stating a really clear, simple limit or instruction? I'm going to keep you safe. And then how are we giving wait time before we repeat that? So what I hear a lot of times is, you need to be safe, safe body, safe body. You're going to come down. I'm going to help you come down now. Get down off that. Do you want to come down by yourself? No, I'm going to help you come down, right? It's a lot of confusing messages and it's a lot. And we know kids can't take in any of that when they are dysregulated, when they're having that big challenging moment. How do we have a clear, concise message? When you can sit on the floor, I know your body is safe. And then how do we give wait time? If you actually count out 15 to 20 Mississippis in your head, 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, it's a long time. We know the brain is not in the frontal cortex. Kids are not recalling information very well when they're dysregulated and having a hard moment. clear and concise, 10 words or less, 10 seconds or less. Give that 10 to 15-second wait time, count out the Mississippis, and think about, are we asking too many questions? Are we talking too much? Are we flipping into that place where we're actually moving towards bribes and threats? If we're noticing that we're doing that, how do we recognize that? And then how do we shift our behavior around that as well?
I just wanted to jump in with both of these last two. I call these wartime strategies. So the previous ones, these were peacetime strategies. But in these wartime strategies, I often remind myself and teachers I work with that any verbal language is for me, to help me regulate, because I can still be up here and more in my cognitive mind, and so that's helps me. But what I'm thinking about for that child is my proximity, my voice, so the tone, the speed, my posture towards them, the pace, um, all of that is what is registering for that child, because that child typically is in survival mode where they're dukes are up or they're trying to run. And so I have to present something, and it's not going to come through the words. And so if I can lessen the words, um, I can pay attention and intentionally use those other skills, lowering the tone or lowering the pace, having the right proximity. All of that communicates so much better to a child in crisis than anything we're going to be able to say.
I love that, Curtis. How we are, right? Our being communicates so much. And with that, we wanted to give a few more reflection questions here. A lot of times we have a lot of worries about, are we going to reinforce a behavior by our response, right? And so the big ones we want you to hold and walk away with are, how do we hold empathy for that child after they have a big behavior? A lot of times, like you just said, Curtis, we might not be regulated. We might be having strong emotions or feelings, and that we have a big response of, I'm not ready to go in and have that hug or have that connection with you again. So how are we holding empathy that that behavior was punishment enough? When a child is dysregulated, it does not feel good. We don't need to double down on other things. What messages are we really sending if we're withholding attention or nurturance or acceptance or the chance to try again to someone who is 36 months old, to someone who is 48 months old, to someone who is brand new on this earth and who their job and their work right now is to be exploring, to be pushing some of those buttons, to try and figure out, what do relationships mean? What do environments mean? And so we thought that these reflective questions could be great ones to bring back with you. They might be helpful if you are working with a particular child right now and think about some additional strategies that may come up with you. And then last but not least, we know that we're all human. There are going to be times that we have missteps, and we know that what is so critical for all young children, especially after a hard moment, is that we have a chance to repair. Hard moments are going to happen in every single relationship. And what we want our kids to walk away with, or our families, or our staff members to walk away with, is that you're still loved. You're still valued. I still am safe. I'm a safe adult. I'm someone who cares about you. I'm someone who can handle your big emotions or your big behaviors. Even if they hurt me, I've got you. And so we have a really great little freebie, I think, that we're sending out at the end. So you will have a really cool poster that talks about ways we can repair. And we also have some really nice sentence starters here for you if repair is something new. So being able to say things like, you're important to me, being able to say things like, we had a really hard moment. I've been thinking about it. I'm really sorry that my voice got really loud then. I'm going to work on using a calm, kind voice, even when I'm feeling frustrated. Or my personal favorite, nothing you can ever do will ever change how I feel about you. I love you. I'm so glad you're here in this classroom. Nothing's ever going to change that. So we wanted to Leave on one last little story here. This comes from a Head Start teacher in Boston, and I love this, so wanted to share it with you all. They remember the way you made them feel. And her quote is, I retired from being a preschool teacher after 25 years. I was at the park with my grandson when a girl who was 17 or 18 came up to me. She said, I remember you. You're the teacher who used to hold me and rock me when I was little and having a hard time. So we just want to hold that you all are those people who are creating these memories, who are creating these lasting impacts on these little lives that are sticking with them well beyond how long you have them in your care and how long you have them and care for them. And we know they stick in your heart too, but recognizing that the way we make them feel is critical. That's what lays that next foundation.
So we'll come back and put questions in there. I love the sharing, and Patrick, thanks for the Maya Angelou quote. Um, I don't think any of this is going to be news to folks that we know that, and we saw many of you mention this about how many teachers in early care and education leave the profession. We know it wasn't just during the COVID pandemic, but that was one space in which we saw it. But we also know these numbers are they just every time I see them, they blow my mind as somebody who's been doing this for 30 years. We also know that folks can't find consultants. That is, despite being a performance standard constantly here, but we don't have a person who can really do what we need them to do. There's not enough consultants. And we also know that some people are just having whoever they can find because that's who's in their community. And while they may not be people who have any background or training in early childhood or have different skills, that, you can call yourself a consultant. We also know how much it costs for a consultant to get trained to be qualified and competent. And that's part of the reason it's so underutilized. So we have something that we've been working on that I think we feel will be super helpful to some of the things that have come up here around addressing challenging behavior. We've built a program, and you can see, and some of these are folks that I'm sure you're familiar with. Uh, uh, Myself and Julia, Amy Hunter, who has been sort of the leader in behavioral health work in the Head Start world for I'm not going to say how long because then she'll get mad, but it's been a while. And then Lauren Rabinovitz, who runs the Center of Excellence for Infant and Early Childhood Mental Health Consultation. We've designed a new pathway to help folks find the right consultants. Either you are going to grow them yourself by actually having childcare staff who we can help develop into competent consultants, or to have folks really become trained on how to be a consultant who have that mental health background and things like that. And we didn't just build it because we think we know. We do know, and we had folks like Shai and our team go out and talk to hundreds and hundreds of folks like you to say, how can we do something that will help you have the person that you need to help with all of these challenging behaviors? Click, little click. So there's a 4-month program. It is asynchronous. It's built on the competencies, the national competencies. It's about 3 hours a week. Then there is ongoing support in which there's group supervision, ongoing professional development. We know the importance of reflective supervision. It will help. It's tied to the endorsements that the Alliance for the Advancement of Infant Mental Health and Early Childhood have developed. We have professional communities of practices with state infant mental health associations. So we've really been thinking about how can we help with one of the issues that you all have expressed to us. And so for the low price of $2,500, which in comparison to many of the programs out there is for 12 months with the leading experts in infant and early childhood mental health consultation. We're super excited. We'll talk more about this as we get into some of the other monthly webinar series. But it's also something we're really trying to tie together if the need is for better, more competent mental health consultants. How can we meet that need? So we're super excited. There's information here, and you can use a QR code. I love that Brittany's ready to sign up. Shai is taking note, and he may be at your door right now. He may be coming straight from London to your door, Brittany. But the other thing, and I'll put it back in the chat for folks, is this, because I know you've also asked. Um, if you want the slide, you're going to get the slides, you're going to get the poster, you're going to get everything. If you need a certificate, I know for many of you that's important. Shai's going to make sure you get that. Um, we have, oh, we're over by a minute. So I don't know if there are any lasting questions for folks. Uh, we'll be here each month. We're here if you have other questions, obviously, but maybe take slides down for a second and just stay for another minute to see if folks have any other questions. I just want to thank Curtis, who we like to bring you into the Zany Thrive Center family and work with us on this. I think your expertise, you're there, you're doing this on a daily basis is super helpful. Also want to thank all 600 and however many folks stayed on with us for the entire hour and shared your wisdom. Really appreciate how much you all are trying to help each other, and that's the other part here is we hope you come each month. This is, this is our family, the 700 or so of us. We'll meet on a monthly basis. We'll figure these things out. We'll keep addressing this. I want you to keep challenging us in the chat. I don't want you to be like, oh, well, you said that it's easy, you just take some breaths and everything's fine. Challenge us, bring out the things that are happening for you, because that's what we're here to help with. So appreciate Samia and Madeline and Mercedes and Shai behind the scenes, making sure that this went off. And Julian Curtis, if you want last words.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity, and thank you for the work you all are doing out in the field. And again, validate those emotions. It's hard. We know it's a hard job. And it's okay to feel those things. And you're still competent and even successful teacher or staff member, whatever your role might be in the program, even if you're feeling those feelings.
I can't wait to go back and read the chat. I think that that's probably my favorite part is seeing how active it was the entire hour and people helping one another. And I think that that's how we support and build a really great community out there is how do we take knowledge from each other? How do we share different opportunities, different resources, different wonderings, and just a huge thank you for the hard work you do. It makes a difference. It's so important. And we're so grateful for all of you.